So can you see, just a quick introduction to the demonstration? Can you all see and hear me?
Yeah, we can see it clear.
All right. So I want to do a first quick demo on the WEkEO portal, the interactive portal, as well as the HDA API. So in the overview picture, those are the boxes here on the left. So basically the mechanism, the portal and the HDA API, they were already available since the initial release. I just want to make sure that everybody knows about them. So what's the purpose of the demo very quickly is to visualize HR-VPP datasets, to request HR-VPP datasets interactively through the WEkEO portal and more programmatically to the HDA API of WEkEO. As I mentioned, the portal is the entry point if you're new to the products. The harmonized API means that you have one API for data from many providers, including Copernicus Land Service, but also others. And as I said, it's a distributed cloud platform, the WEkEO. So this is the WEkEO portal. I will demonstrate it live in a minute. You have the URL here. We have published a couple of video tutorials. You find the links in the presentation, and then also the user manual. There are a couple more interactive. This is what the map will look like in a minute. There are a couple of more interactive portals, which were already briefly mentioned. I wanted to just mention them just so that you have the full picture and all the links. This is the SDI catalog of the EEA, of the European Environment Agency, where you have the metadata records. That's purely for discovery, so for finding out what data sets are available. You find metadata description according to the INSPIRE regulation. And this is, of course, a current land portal where you have all these links to the manuals, the tooling, etc., which was already mentioned. But then before I go into the HDA API, let me switch very quickly to the browser. Do you guys see my browser window?
No, Tim, we don't see that this moment.
Let me try again then. Better now?
Yeah, now we see it. Yeah, we see the WEkEO portal. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the WEkEO portal. If you're new to it, if you come back to it, it looks like this. You click on the data here, and you open the data portal here. So this is already showing one of the HR-VPP datasets. If you want to show a dataset, just click on the plus sign here. And you can start filtering all the datasets. You see there are a lot of available here. There are 44 datasets from the Land Service if you're interested. There are a couple of them from EA. You can filter, use the filters here on the left. I will just type in HR-VPP because it knows it brings me to the HR-VPP datasets. So you see here the seasonal trajectories, the 10 daily in UTM projection, in live projection. You have the vegetation indices in UTM projection, and then we have the VPP parameters, the annual ones, in both UTM and live projection. In this case, let me pick just one. I want to add it to the map, so you see all the different layers here, all the different product types, the amplitudes, the productivity, the slopes, the season length, all the parameters that Lars introduced. I think I'm already showing one of them, so let's add, for instance, another one, a maximum date, like that. So you see it. You can go back. What is important to note also is, if you go back to the data set, there is a metadata record. There's some nice links here. This identifier here, this dataset identifier code, that's an important one for the next part of the demonstration. So I wanted to show it while I'm here. And then when I go back to the map, you see the different layers are being shown, the different dates. You can zoom in, of course, navigate. You can switch between layers if you want to. Just very quickly. See, you see the details starting to come up. There is a time bar here at the bottom if you want to pick the nice dates. A different date can be a little bit slow to load, of course. Try to zoom out. It's always the risk of a live demo. me try. It's a bit too slow to load, unfortunately. Let me then sign out and sign in again. That's better. Sorry for that. Let me try to sign in with the demo account right here, so I can show you also how to request the data. So we're now here at the VPP parameter. As I showed you, you can switch the layers here. You can switch the transparency just next to it. And this first button right here is to actually download or put in a data request. So if we go to a specific area here, I can do a small box, copy the AOI from the map. I can put in a time parameter if I want. So speak of a specific year here. And then I can put in the request. You can see that it is already done. It's rather fast. See the results. It found those two tiles. I can simply order them. And then I can start downloading. What is important for the second part of the demonstration is also this API request. So this small button right here. This configuration, this JSON here, it basically puts in or records all the options that I put into my data request. So the coordinates of the box that I drew, the time range that I selected, the type of product that I was viewing, etc. So it's all getting recorded, and then I can use this API payload or this API information to send the request also programmatically. There is a small copy button here to make sure it's in my clipboard. I will try one more time with another data set. Let's try adding the vegetation indices because I wanted to show one more trick. Let's take the PPI, for instance, and let's take also the quality flag. Now it's getting there. So this is the PPI. As you can see, the daily orbits, you can see them very nicely. You can switch to different dates if you want. And I wanted to show you also that you have the possibility, because we have this quality flag layer, to also put in the quality information on top as an overlay on top of your vegetation index, for instance, to mask out the clouds, to mask out the sea, and so on and so on. So that was basically what I wanted to show in the first part of the demonstration using the WEkEO portal. In the second part of my demonstration, I will go back to the Jupyter, to my notebook. So most of the demonstrations that you will see this afternoon, they are carried out in a notebook environment, which is really cool and interactive to play with the data, to explore the data a bit. I prepared a quick notebook regarding the HDA or Harmonized Data Access API. So quick introduction. This is Python code. I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with Python code. So we can just run it step by step. You see, you have to install the HDA client package, which is available from ECMWF. It's installed. It's very nice. I start up the client. I put in my username, password, of course. I define the HDA client. So this is normally this URL, the username and password. You can also put them into a file of your choosing on your local drive, so you don't have to include it directly in the code. Then, as I mentioned just before, we need a dataset identifier to explore the different datasets. We need to know which dataset we want to explore, which we want to discover. As I showed on the portal, you click on the details button, and in the details, there is an identifier code. These are the codes available for all the HR-VPP datasets, just for your convenience. Now we can get a quick description of one of the datasets. This is essentially the same metadata and details that you saw on the portal, but then query it in a programmatic way, so through Python code. Here, to check which options are available in the data request, which filter options like the bounding box, like the time period, and set, etc. We can create a metadata of the dataset. So it tells me here, okay, it's looking for a bounding box option. It supports also a date range for the temporal interval. It has a processing date, it has product types, and etc., etc. So different filters that you can use in your code. But rather than building up your data request payload, so the JSON file that you need to send along with your request for the data, rather than building that up directly in the code based on the available options, which is quite tricky to do, it's much easier to go back to the portal, issue one request like I did just before, open this button for the API request example code, and then copy it into your clipboard. When you do that, I put this JSON information into a simple file. See here for the seasonal trajectories. So here says I want to download or access seasonal trajectory data for this bounding box for this time period, and I want the PPI data, not the quality flag. I load in my code the simple JSON. It's very simple. See, it's loaded. Let me run that very quickly. It's very fast, of course. And I want to perform through the HDA API a search that gives me all the products that match the criteria that I specified. So it found 4 products, totaling just over 700 megabytes in size. And this is the technical job identifier for the data processing on the WEkEO side. Then, of course, I can just start off the download like that. Takes a little bit of time. And you will see the files being downloaded directly into my notebook environment. It will pop up on the left here. There are 4 of them. It doesn't take too long. And of course, now that's done, as I'm working in a programmatic environment, I can run this code either in the Jupyter Hub or directly on my own computer. It works the same way. I can, of course, start manipulating the JSON payload to request other bounding box areas or other time periods or other product types, whatever I want. But what is nice to know about the HDA and about the WEkEO API is that you can use the same mechanism essentially to download also other data sets from WEkEO, which might be interesting for your analysis. Most of the time, it's not just about using HR-VPP, it's also using meteorological data, temperature data, soil moisture data, etc., etc. So if that's available on WEkEO, you can use the same API to also get hold of that. I have an example request here. This is another data set that you can find on WEkEO. It's called agrometeorological indicators from a reanalysis model at SCMWF, in short, AG-ERA5. You can load the similar JSON file, which was prepared through the portal. You can perform a similar search. It will just find one file in here. I was requesting temperature data for the same time period and for the same area as I did for the seasonal trajectory data. And I can issue the download. And in a little while, you see the progress bar going up. And then we have our zip file in here with the agromet indicators. That's what I wanted to show in my demonstration. In the presentation file, in my presentation, you have the link to the GitHub where you can find this notebook and the examples. So if you want to work further on them, you're more than welcome to do that.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Perhaps you can put the link also in the chat, because the presentations will not yet be available. So for those who those participants who don't want, or you show it.
Just a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see them. Yeah.
So this is the last slide of this presentation, and all the links are there, the documentation of the API, the notebook code, and the different steps that it performs.
Okay.
I will make sure to post the Python notebook link in the chat so everybody has it.
Okay. Yeah, would be great. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So here again, if you have questions, just put them in the Q&A, then do not forget them. But there is a second part, of course, at the access, and that's using, I think, the HTTPS, so the other access channel, and that's Dirk will explain that and also demonstrate how to do that. Go ahead, Dirk.
Yeah, I'll share my screen, just a second.
Yeah, okay, we see it.
Okay, so you can see my screen now, huh? Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah. So the part I will show today is mainly focusing on the OpenSearch API, which is an alternative for the HDA API that WEkEO exposes. And I'll walk you through two user notebooks which use this OpenSearch API. The first one queries the catalog for products and downloads the data to the notebook environment, similar like Tim showed, using the HDA interface. And the second one is also a demo of the OpenSearch API, but then the data is directly accessed over S3. So for the first notebook, this is where it is situated in the overall picture that Tim also presented. So we will be using the OpenSearch API, and we will download the data over HTTP. And these endpoints are publicly available, so this can actually be executed from any environment. I'll demonstrate this first notebook on the WEkEO notebook service, but as I said, it can be run from any environment. The only thing that you need is a WEkEO user account. So I'll first install and import the client package that comes with the OpenSearch API. Then I'll show you how to discover the collections, search for products, and in the end, download the data. So I think you should now see my notebook environment.
Yeah, confirmed.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, the outline is actually the same as I already showed in the presentation. The notebook also contains some links to the documentation of the OpenSearch API, and also the Python client that comes with it. And the first thing that we have to do actually is to start installing the package that comes with the OpenSearch client. Just make sure that you specify the correct version. It should be 0.1.14 or higher. And then we can start importing the required packages and initializing the catalog client. The only thing that you have to make sure is that you select the proper catalog environment, because this catalog client can interface with multiple environments, so not just HR-VPP. Then the next thing that we'll do is to discover the collections. So this is just done using the get collections method. And as Tim explained, yeah, you will see one vegetation index collection in UTM projection, and for VPP and ST seasonal trajectories, we have both collections in UTM and LI projections. The next thing that we'll do is search for some products. So let's search for all VPP parameters for this UTM tile, and then for year 2020. So here you see actually the collection identifier from the list above. So when we execute this query, then you'll immediately get all matching products. Here on the left-hand side, you see the product identifier, and also in the list, you can see the HTTP link, which can be used to download the data, and on the right-hand side, you have the size of the file. As Tim also mentioned, this API supports more variables than the HDA interface. So we can also start, for example, subsetting on product type, product group ID, which is the season, so season 1, season 2. So if we execute this query, then we'll eventually get a single file that we can download. And as I mentioned, for the download part, you will need some WEkEO credentials, which I'll just put in the text boxes. So the username and also the passwords. So, and then you can authenticate and then start downloading the data. So you just have to confirm that you want to download the data. And this will download the data to the notebooks environment. And once this is finished, then this data will be downloaded here to the temporary directory or some other directory that you specified. So let me go back to the slides then. So this actually is an additional page which contains a link to also the notebook example which I showed, but also some other links to, for example, the documentation of the catalog client I used in the notebook example, and also a link to the public GitHub repository hosting the code of the Terra catalog client. So the next notebook I want to show is quite similar, but the difference is that it will actually use the data that is stored on object storage on S3 on WEkEO. So there's actually no need to start downloading the data to your environment. This notebook will be demonstrated on the CREO-DIAS notebook service, because this is not possible on the WEkEO notebook service, because the endpoint that we use to access the data over S3, the endpoint that is mentioned here, is only accessible from within a CREO-DIAS or WEkEO cloud tenant, and it's not yet supported on the WEkEO notebook service. The only thing that you need, of course, is access to such a CREO-DIAS or WEkEO tenant, or you can also use the CREO-DIAS notebook service, as I'll show in the demo. So the outline is a bit similar, but this time we'll not search for the VPP products in UTM tiling grid, but using the LI projection, and we'll access the data over S3. So when I go to to the CREODIAS notebook service. It looks a bit different, but actually the functionality is quite similar. So first thing that we'll do again is to install the Python client. And then, I just repeated actually the discovery of the collections. And then the product search will be a bit different. So here I will search for the products in live projection. The year is the same, but I'll loop actually over some light tiles which will cover Belgium. Then this will be aggregated and put into a list. There's one difference that I should definitely mention here, is that the catalog API supports different access methods. And using this parameter, the access from parameter, you can actually specify that you want to get the product URLs as S3 URLs, so which directly point to the data on object storage. You can also subset on resolution, for example, for the live products. And here we also subset on a specific product type. So if we execute this query, then you see here on the left-hand side again the product identifier next to the S3 URL and also the size of the data. So let's start accessing the data. For example, if we would like to download all this data, that would mean transferring more than 1 GB of data to the notebooks environment, which we don't want. So I'll put no here. And instead, I'll show how to use actually Boto3 and Raster.io using a simple example to directly access the data. So what I'll actually do is just use one of the URLs which were printed above, and then I can just use Boto3 and Raster.io to access the data. And here you again see this private S3 endpoint, which was also mentioned on the slides. And one other thing to note is that actually the S3 credentials that you use to access the data, they don't really matter, but they should definitely be specified, otherwise you will get an error. And this is just something that is quite specific to the S3 endpoint that Cloudflare is exposing. So this is not something that we chose, but it comes with the S3 endpoints of Cloudflare. So if we execute this part of the demo, then you'll just see actually a subset of the data shown in the notebook. So if I go back to the slides, then on my last slides, I just repeated some of the links which were on the previous slides, and I also put in a link to the notebook example in the public GitHub repository. So that concludes my part of the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Dirk. I think, again, it shows nicely, and I think the examples or the notebooks, at least that we, we'll put the link again in the, the presentations will be online later on the website, on the Copernicus website, but we'll put also the link to this demo in the chat that you can play around with it. And I think that's a good example to start from, to play around with it and to extend it for your application. I think it shows the OpenSearch client where you need to have the WEkEO user. If you don't have a WEkEO user login, I think you just need to go to the WEkEO portal and just register yourself. It's a free login, and then you get access to kind of a free notebook that you can use to execute it. And I think for the CreoDias, I think Dirk, it's the same, but then you need to go to just the CreoDias site, register, and then you get access at least to a free notebook environment, and there you, yeah, I mean, you can execute or upload the notebook and start playing around with it.